Hello, I'm Chris Burns, and welcome to The Network, where we connect into a matrix of newsmakers to get to the heart of an issue. Watch out, they've got to answer in 25 seconds or less, or else. Let's take a look at that issue right now. The leaked list of names spans the globe, with current and former officials who stash their cash in offshore accounts, evading onerous taxes back home. The news has stirred outrage, forcing policymakers to crack down harder on tax fraud while they impose harsh austerity, including higher taxes, on their citizens. The European Commission says tax cheats cost EU governments €1 trillion in lost revenue annually. 5 EU countries, Britain, France, Germany, Italy, and Spain, have agreed to exchange tax information and called on the European Commission to get all 27 member states on board. This just after revelations of tax dodging via Switzerland forced the resignation of France's budget minister, the very official in charge of being the tax watchdog. Are governments doing enough to close those gaping tax loopholes? Or are those havens stark evidence that tax rates in some countries are just too high and too tempting to evade? Now, wired into this edition of The Network is from Berlin, Robin Hodess, Transparency International's Group Director of Advocacy and Research. Here at the European Parliament, Philippe Lamberts, who's on the Parliament's Committee on Economic and Monetary Affairs and is a member of the Greens European Free Alliance Party Group. And in Bern, Switzerland, Mario Tuor, spokesperson for the Swiss government's State Secretary for International Financial Matters. Let me start with a question to all of you, starting with Robin. Why did it take so long to discover this? Who failed to blow the whistle?
Well, the leaks are very important, but really what we see is since the financial crisis in 2008, there's been increasing pressure for transparency. Transparency is the issue that we're all moving toward, and we think this is an essential way that we can uncover the flow of illicit funds around the world, not just tax evasion, but illicit monies that's hiding in secrecy jurisdictions everywhere.
Okay, now, so you think it's because of the rising pressure, but what do you think, Philippe?
Well, I think that actually it's not for lack of whistleblowers that the information was not around, but actually for lack of wanting to hear what the whistleblowers were saying. I mean, we have been amongst those like Transparency International, the Tax Justice Network, pushing for more transparency, more action against tax havens. And guess what? Right now on the official OECD blacklist, there's none. There are no tax havens right now because actually governments prefer to look the other way.
Mario, are governments preferring to look the other way?
Well, we always say that the automatic exchange of information is a very inefficient model to fight against tax evasion. So Switzerland has proposed another model which is more efficient and allows to tax every taxpayer, and he can choose if he wants to disclose the information or he wants to pay the tax. So the client has to choose, and we think that's a good model.
Okay, exchanging tax information, that's what 5 EU countries have agreed on, and they want that as a template for a global agreement. Robin, do you think that's feasible to take it beyond those 5 countries, at least within the EU, 27, soon 28?
It's not only feasible, it's necessary. It's really important that the good work that's come out of some legislation in the U.S. in 2010, that the G20 work, the OECD work, provides a new standard for exchanging information.
Okay, but Philippe, let's face it, let's try to be realistic. You're there with 27, soon 28 other countries there at the European Parliament. How is it possible to get all 28 on board on this?
Actually, if the pressure is there and if the political will is there, it's no big deal to put that in place. And of course, I understand the reluctance of Switzerland because, well, Switzerland built a significant part of its business model precisely on bank secrecy. But again, well, you know, perfectly functioning markets suppose transparency, and there's a few obligations that citizens have if they want to be citizens, and that is, well, one of them is to pay their taxes, and there should be no place to hide away from your citizens' obligation.
Okay, that's what French President François Hollande is saying. He's under pressure now because of that scandal in France. He wants to, in his words, eradicate tax havens worldwide. The G20 has just thrown its support behind this kind of idea. Mario, don't you have to go with that flow?
No, we are strongly committed that there should not be tax evasion, and we have to fight against tax evasion. Everyone should pay its taxes. The question is what is the best model to guarantee that? And we think in theory transparency is okay, but in the practice transparency, this exchange of data, is very difficult to handle by governments. And we think if you can tax the money at the source and then transfer it, that's a much better way.
Okay. Robin, how much do you think this is a matter of countries insisting on their sovereignty, or is it that they want to protect a sector and the jobs in that sector, that financial sector?
As we see countries very legitimately trying to replenish the public purse in the wake of the financial crisis, and as there's austerity at home, it's critical that they find a new way to create incentives for business. And after all, we have to think about what kind of reputational damage business can suffer when they're caught putting money in places, having bank accounts in places that they don't even operate.
Okay. And Philippe, what do you think? You think it's more jobs, or is it sovereignty?
Well, actually, sovereignty begins with the ability for states to collect the taxes that are due, and if that means that they need information, well, so be it.
Mario, is this a matter of sovereignty, or is it? You do have a large financial sector.
A little bit both, but we have concerns about the efficiency of this model. So we don't see really the practical effect.
Okay, what about within the EU cracking down on some of these countries that are reputed tax havens? Luxembourg has come under criticism. Cyprus has come under criticism. The S&D says they'd like to see an EU blacklist. What do you think, Robin?
It's really important that this trend towards transparency, towards opening up tax exchange, exchanging more about financial flows, this is going to put pressure on illegal flows of all kinds, criminal monies. And after all, the monies that hide taxes around the world also hide corruption. Ultimately, when people don't pay their taxes, there isn't money in the public purse. There's social damage of all kind to all people. And this includes people in the developing world who also have the problem with their money flowing into the northern banks.
Philippe, isn't this a matter, though, too, that they'll find another way? Well, that their accountants will find another way to get around any kind of these tax rules?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that people will keep trying hiding their money. I'm sure that they will. Now, we have to make their life more difficult. That's what we want to do. I mean, 100% fail-safe system doesn't exist, but then we have to go after them. And right now, well, let's face it, finance ministers have been rather protective of their banks and big wealth rather than going after them.
Right. Mario, what do you think about that? And what about the fact that, some people say, and I think a lot of people in Switzerland say that, look, it's not our fault, it's other countries whose tax rates are too high. Okay. People are looking for a way to get out of it.
No, that was in the past. We always said your taxes is not our problem, but that's not so. We accepted the right of states to tax their people, also if they have accounts abroad. That's not a problem. But also we look to the developments, and we may find that the system is not very efficient, but if there would be a global standard, a real global standard for all countries, then we would be ready to discuss it.
Okay, and then what about this aspect that we've seen this debate in France, where now they've sort of some people say the pendulum has swung too far, that there's too much disclosure. It's forcing, even Libération newspaper said that the disclosure rules are now making politicians being judged not by their politics and not by their policies, but by how much money they have. So don't you think it's gone too far, Robin?
It's very important when people hold political power that they're clear about what kind of interests they have. So declaration of assets, where you have your money, what you're invested in, is very important for a public official. We think asset declarations, which are being picked up around the world, it's very important to be able to tell citizens how you earn money and who's influencing your politics. It's the same with lobby registers. This kind of openness about political interest is critical to democracy and also to economic growth.
Okay, Mario, has it gone too far?
Well, if there is the opinion that there would be a global standard, then the discussion should go into a clear, a sound standard, which is accepted really by all countries, not only by the small ones, and that also look to trust. You have to look to trust in Anglo-Saxon areas. So it's absolutely necessary to identify the beneficial owner, like we do in Switzerland.
Okay. Mario, thank you very much. Thanks to all of you. We're out of time. I'd like to thank our guests, Robin Hodess, Philippe Lamberts, and Mario Tuor. I'm Chris Burns, and until next time, thanks for connecting with The Network.